Hello, and welcome to GB 2.0, a show that talks about civil rights that has occurred in the past, what's going on right now, and what we hope for in the future. Godless Bitches is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin and an educational nonprofit dedicated to the separation of government and religion and the promotion of positive atheist culture. So we have two regular folks, Jen Peeples over there on the edge, living on the edge like I am, Tracie Harris.
I'm very regular.
Very regular. Both of y'all, those two are on the Atheist Experience quite a bit and do a lot of other awesome things. And then a special guest today, Annie Hartnett, who is an activist, and she's active in so many things, including immigration rights and I'll let her tell all the stories, but she's done all the things, and normally on this show we talk a lot about what's going on in the world, and I come away sometimes feeling like we need to give them things to do. Annie is that person. She will have ideas for you to do things, and in fact, I'm going to tell a story on Annie. When a certain someone was elected president, I pulled out all the stops and did all the things. And one of them was to have postcard parties. And we would have friends come over, beer, chocolate, everything to help us feel better, and write postcards to all the people who needed to hear from us. And it really felt like we were screaming into a void because we're writing deeply Republican folks who don't agree with the things that I personally believe in. So Annie started coming, and what she did is she sat down, she said, well, I'm going to write a thank you note to somebody who was doing something right. And I was like, oh. She brought a light to it that helped me, and I think other people too, feel like, okay, some things are going right, and we need to thank the folks who are helping that happen, because I'm sure they don't hear it often enough. They only hear grousing from their constituents. And it really shifted my view on the whole postcard party night. That's Annie in a story. Oh, it's true. It's true. I
was going to say that's one of the things about the indivisible groups. I mean, there's like a playbook, and the playbook when Congress was held, when the House was held by Republicans, was different than the playbook now. And the playbook now involves contacting representatives who are doing the right thing and letting them know, because they need feedback from constituents that they are actually representing their constituencies.
Yeah.
Because they are representatives.
Exactly.
Yes.
Go figure.
Hot dog, yeah.
But, when somebody comes up with a propaganda thing saying, oh, the American people want this wall or whatever, they can say, oh, no, I have contact from my constituents along the border, by the way, who say, no, they don't want the wall.
Right. The vast majority do not want this
right.
wall. This is probably stuff you can talk about. Let's see. So I forgot your bio. Oh my God. So I'm having a bad brain day. For those of you who know that I've had a concussion, I'm having a bad brain day, just so you know. And these ladies are going to save me. So
I'm just here for the arm wrestling part.
Yeah.
We need to switch seats.
So one of the things that Annie does is participate in what's called CLAW, C-L-A-W. I'm going to turn it over to Annie to talk about what it is.
All right. I am a member. Actually, I'm a retired wrestler. I was a wrestler with the collective of lady arm wrestlers for 4 or 5 years. I got to go to the national championship in Washington.
Ooh, yes.
And what CLAW does, CLAW is the most amazing group of women. And what we do is each chapter is run locally. So there's a chapter in Austin. There are chapters in L.A., in New York, in Durham, North Carolina, in Charlotte, all over the place. And there are even some international chapters now. And it's up to each chapter to choose a woman-run nonprofit, small grassroots that benefits women and children. And each year or each bout, a different organization is chosen and funds are raised for those nonprofits. And so there's a big show, and everybody gets really dressed up, and you've got an entourage. It's kind of like, I guess, World Federation Wrestling. Like, you've got a persona. My persona was Editrix, the dominatrix editor. And and we raised money for charity. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, a little variation on the Junior League, maybe. And some of it's pretty bawdy, and it can get rough. Several people have broken their arms arm wrestling. It's not, I mean, the organization tries very carefully. They have referees that are trained, but it's you can break your arm when you arm wrestle. Yeah. But we normally, here in Austin, the Austin chapter of CLAW raises $5,000 to $10,000 per bout.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, Cheer Up Charlie's is one of the places that we've held the events, and they're awesome. And we get a great turnout. It's super fun. It's like the funnest night of the year.
Yeah, they're throwing money at you.
Yeah, they are.
So fun.
Sticking it down your bra and everything.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
So I did get this put down here. Editrix and the Mistresses of Correction. That's her group's name. And bookish Bobby Ann Smith dreamed of leaving her small Texas hometown and pursuing a career in publishing. The only job she could find, though, was a copy editor at the Texas legislature. There she learned that while she was good at correcting typos, she was excellent at correcting the legislators themselves. So that's just delicious. And I believe I lent you a crop, right?
Oh,
a writing crop.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of fun. It's
and I
awesome.
broke it on somebody, I think.
Right on. Right on.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the spanking. And you'd be surprised how many people want to be spanked.
Yeah.
And will pay you money to spank
Oh, no.
them.
We have a show called Secular Sexuality, and one of their things is kinks. So
yeah.
we're real up on that, so to speak. Okay, so there's that. So do we want to talk news stories first, or Annie, would you rather just start in on the border and your experiences there? I think that would be amazing. Would you like to start?
I'm happy to start,
Okay.
yeah. I am really, really grateful that y'all invited me to talk. I feel like any opportunity to let people know what's really happening on the southern border of the United States is one I want to take. There's so many misrepresentations. There's so many myths. There's so much fake news, I guess. I want to qualify what I'm saying first by saying I'm not a fronteriza. I don't live on the border. I'm not as qualified to speak on this issue as many, many other people, but I do have some experience, personal experience, and I'm happy always to share that because the more people can counteract this false narrative about what's happening on the U.S. border, the better. I started travel. Well, my first trip. Well, okay, let's go back.
Let's go back to the beginning.
I traveled a bunch when I was a kid, so I love to travel. I grew up traveling, and then traveled only, backpacked around India and Nepal and Thailand and everywhere when I was young. And once I moved to Texas, I continued to like to travel and camp and backpack, and so I fell in love with the Big Bend area. Mm-hmm. And I volunteered for a while working on the trails in the Big Bend National Park. So that's a part of the Texas-Mexico border that is incredibly rugged, incredibly beautiful. There are cliffs on either side of the Rio Grande River that make it, in many places, really impossible for someone to cross there. It's very remote. As far as I know, there's no proposal to build any kind of wall, like in Santa Elena Canyon or anything. But you never know what they'll come up with.
I was going to say, I would not
put it past
right. anyone.
Yeah. So that was my initial love affair with the border. And then in 2017, I heard about a Sierra Club trip to a place called Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge. And I learned that the Trump administration was planning to build a border wall across that National Wildlife Refuge. And as a lover of the state park system, the national park system, as a camper, hiker, kayaker, I was really disturbed by this. And so I decided to go with a Sierra Club trip. It was my birthday weekend, and I guess my birthday in 2017. And for people who don't know, the part of South Texas that all the first border wall construction is planned for is the Rio Grande Valley. And that part of Texas is very different from, for example, Big Bend. Texas is huge. It's like a country. It's bigger than a lot of countries.
Yeah.
And the geography is so varied. And the Rio Grande Valley is very almost like subtropical. And the Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge is old growth forest, and it's right on the Rio Grande River. So, you look across the river and there's Mexico. I mean, all across the Texas-Mexico border is a river that if you want to cross, you have to swim the river. And nowadays, in some places, there are actually alligators in that river because they've swum up from the Gulf. So it's not getting across the river is not an easy prospect. Anyway, there was a planned protest of the plan to build the border wall in Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge. And what I saw when I attended that event was a community of people who loved that place. And the whole event started, I know this is like the Atheist Community of Austin, but it did start. The event was started and was led by a priest at at Our Lady of Guadalupe, I think, church in Mission, Texas. And this guy is a total character, Father Roy. And the procession starts. He's got this blue Pinto station wagon, dogs coming out every window, like dog heads coming out every window, a giant statue of the Virgin Mary, and playing like Willie Nelson and all this crazy music from these loudspeakers, and just leading the people. And we marched that day for at least a mile to this place called La Lomita Chapel. And I just met a bunch of different really amazing, diverse people. There's a group of Native Americans, the Carrizo Camicrudo. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name. They are heavily involved with the fight against the border wall in the Rio Grande Valley. There were people of all ages. There was a woman, an elderly woman, walking the entire way with a walker, with two bright green tennis balls on the front of the walker. She pushed that walker the whole way. There were children. There were just every kind of people, Latino, Latina, white, black, indigenous people, everybody. And it would all join together, people who looked like they would be Republicans or they would be in favor of the border wall, but they were not. And they understand how this is going to impact their community. And I was just really touched by that. And then there was another event the following day at the National Wildlife Refuge. The border wall was planned to be built on the levee. There's a levee, an earthen levee that is designed to control flooding from the Rio Grande River. And so in many parts of Hidalgo County in South Texas, the plan is to build the wall on top of the levee. And so all these people, and it's a huge, Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge is a huge birding mecca. People come from actually all over the world because bird species from Central America like the yellow or gold. I think they're called golden orb weavers. They weave like a basket nest, and green jays and other things. They come that far north, but that's the only place in the United States you can see them. So people come from everywhere, and there was this line of people all along the levee, all holding hands in solidarity against the border wall. I have to add that it was very hard to get the people to hold hands, which is an American thing. Like, Americans do not want to hold each other's hands, especially the dudes who are like, I gotta hold this guy's hand. But everybody held hands, and it was just really moving experience, profound experience the whole weekend. And that sort of launched me into the activism against the border wall and in favor of sane immigration policies. So,
didn't you draft? I remember that you drafted a policy.
I drafted the resolution against the border wall and in favor of comprehensive immigration reform that was passed by the city of Austin.
She drafted that, y'all.
Right? Well, it was a really enjoyable task. I loved it. I loved doing research and learning, and I was asked by the Texas branch of the Sierra Club to draft the resolution, and then Councilmember Greg Cesar's office was really instrumental in helping to get that resolution passed. And then cities around Texas, there are many cities around Texas who have passed similar resolutions. We helped one another. We talked and shared ideas. Yeah. So a lot of cities and local governments are standing up against the policies of the Trump administration. So we've got this flip where the Republicans are now against local control.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting? How the flip on that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, I just talked a bunch. I'm so sorry.
No,
that's what we're here for.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take a commercial break here because I forgot to do a couple things at the beginning. Sorry, gang. We are having a concert here. Mark, are you ready to cue that up? Because I screwed up when it should be done. But the intro music and outro music for this show and also the Atheist Experience are done by a woman named Shirley Siegel. And she purposely pronounces her name Siegel. And she's going to be in concert here on Valentine's Day. So, Mark, are you ready to roll that puppy?
Make this Valentine's Day one to remember. It's time to get sexy. Live in Austin, Texas, an intimate performance by recording artist Shirley Siegel follows a live taping of Secular Sexuality. Food is included and drinks will be available for purchase. Get your tickets now by going to eventbrite.com and search for Secular Sexuality. That's eventbrite.com, search Secular Sexuality.
It's going to be awesome.
I think Editrix would like that.
Editrix would like that. Yeah, right on. She should come and see. Okay, so that also gave me a chance to grab Annie's bio. All righty. Annie Hartnett is a mother dancer, writer, and editor. And that's the other thing. She's an amazing dancer and choreographer. Every Christmas, my daughter and I would go see her group dance, and it was actually our favorite Christmas thing to do. And she stopped doing it, so we're sad now. She is editorial director of Why Are You Marching Texas? There's a Facebook group for it, and it's amazing. It's got all sorts of activism and things that you can help with. A project that documents activism in her home state. Following a trip to Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge, she joined the Sierra Club Borderlands team, drafted a resolution against the border wall passed by the city of Austin in October 2017. See, I did remember that. And traveled to Washington, D.C. to lobby for comprehensive immigration reform. And we have a wonderful picture of her in Washington, D.C. Can you put that photo up while I'm talking, maybe? And against militarization of our southern border. She is also an active member of the collective of lady arm wrestlers. So I think we've covered all of those things. We just didn't get the introduction like we wanted to. Also, would you please click that subscribe button no matter what medium you're watching us on, because we think we're worth being subscribed to. So, alrighty, back to the show. Now that I did that. So you had some specific experiences that you told me about on the border that were just amazing. Folks want asylum. We all know about that. And at least for me, the perception is that nobody ever gets in. You get stuck in court and you're stuck there forever. But that's not true. And Annie's the one that told me about this. So if you could talk about the work that is being done and how you got involved and how you can get involved.
I just know about a tiny piece of this, but I'm
Tiny piece
happy
is
to
great.
talk about it. Well, there are a couple of things. The Trump administration is trying very hard, in my opinion, to make America white again. And one of the ways they're trying to do that is by curbing immigration from Central America, from Latin America, from everywhere actually. But unless like it's Sweden or Switzerland, I'm sure they'd be happy to have
People
you.
from Norway white? Yeah. I was going to say the DHS secretary had no idea.
And would they want to come here?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, wow.
Anyway, one of the ways that they're doing this, well, of course, the border wall is part of that effort to stop people from crossing, although I will tell you right now, it does nothing. Well, it may do something, but it does very little to actually stop people from crossing.
The wall itself.
The wall itself. Yeah. So there is already wall built in every state in the United States. So all the border states, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, all of them have wall. That wall was funded under George W. Bush, and most of it was constructed under the Obama administration. It's different. There are different kinds of wall. Some of it's fencing, some of it's just vehicle barriers. But you can go, if you would like, to South Texas and see some of this wall. And I did that, and I'm just going to tell a story, and then I'll get back to what we were supposed to talk about. Okay.
It's free form.
So in one of my previous trips to the border, I wanted to see the wall and what it looks like, and just get a feeling for what's there. So my friend Scott Nickel, who is incredibly knowledgeable activist with Borderlands team, the Lower Rio Grande Valley Sierra Club, is actually writing a book about the border wall. He knows everything about it. I think he brought me down to he brought me down to see the wall. And while we were down there, we were walking on U.S. Fish and Wildlife property. And it was a walking trail. It was a birding trail. It was marked, labeled as such. We were approached by first one Border Patrol agent who told us we weren't allowed to walk there. And then a second Border Patrol agent, senior to the first one, followed us down the trail. You can see that trail, the picture. It's like you can drive on that trail. He drove up in his truck and said, you can't walk here. Mm-hmm. And we said, well, yes, we can. And he said, well, no, you can't. And eventually, I actually started filming him, and he said, oh, please don't put my video on Facebook. and then we just got to talk.
Please don't do things that would make you not want your video on Facebook. Yes.
Yeah. And then we got to talking, and he said, well, if you want to see a little further down, there's a stack of ladders. We find them all the time. And actually at the old Hidalgo pump house, there's a whole pavilion. It's a kind of a public place. There's a pavilion that they built out of ladders that they had found along the border wall. And they're also, like, if you look closely, there are finger and footprints all over the steel, whatever they are, slats. Yeah. People climb over the wall. They tunnel under it.
They fly over it. They take a boat
They
around
mostly come through the ports of entry. And so that leads into my next story, which is what you asked about.
Yes.
So the ports of entry, a lot of them in South Texas anyway, there's a bridge that goes from Mexico to the United States and it goes over the Rio Grande River. And Border Patrol, I think maybe as much as a year ago, maybe just 6 months ago, they started setting up kind of blockades in the middle of the bridge to keep people from getting to the U.S. It's called metering. And it's not really legal because, by international law, anyone can seek asylum in the United States, but they must ask a request for asylum on U.S. soil. So in order to request asylum, they have to get to the U.S. And so a lot of times people are talking about illegals crossing, which I don't think any human being should be referred to as an illegal. But anyway, crossing illegally, people crossing illegally, well, actually, a lot of those people are legally seeking asylum. That's the process.
Right.
Yep.
But the Border Patrol agents have set up sort of a roadblock in the middle of the bridge. So now we have a situation in South Texas on many of the bridges where people don't want to lose their place. These asylum seekers from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, they don't want to lose their place in line because Border Patrol is only letting a few people through every day. So they camp out on these bridges. And they camp out for sometimes weeks at a time with young children in all weather. And there are groups of people now in the U.S. who are helping the asylum seekers who are camped on the bridges. So one of the recent interviews I did for Why Are You Marching Texas was with a woman who was involved in an organization called Team Brownsville. You can look them up. They are providing hot meals to the asylum seekers on the bridges every day. So they have kitchens set up. This is completely grassroots. Like this is in somebody's kitchen of their home. They're making food. They're loading it on a wagon, a little red wagon. They're walking across the border, pulling their little red wagon, and they're feeding people. The woman's name that I interviewed is Gabby Zavala. The organization is Team Brownsville. It's just all volunteer. You can donate to them. If you Google Team Brownsville or asylum seekers, I'm sure you can find it. So, what was the question?
You had an amazing experience there. You told me about. You just walked in and said, "Can I help?"
Oh yes. Yeah. So that's one way. So the folks helping people on the bridges. That's one way that Texans and people in other states as well are helping asylum seekers. In McAllen, Texas, which is in the Rio Grande Valley, it's been called the epicenter of the border crisis. And that's the place that I normally go when I visit the border because I have friends there now. And so even though the administration is trying to keep people from crossing, Border Patrol does let people through, and they are processed by U.S. Immigration Services. And so if somebody has a credible case for asylum, they have been, beaten, threatened with violence, the stories, victims of domestic abuse, but it has to be really bad because that's not really even a reason to be able to seek asylum anymore. But anyway, some people are let through. And what the Border Patrol has been doing for years is just kind of dumping those people at the Greyhound bus station to make their way further into the interior of the United States. And these people have walked for thousands of miles or traveled for thousands of miles. They have nothing. And so various organizations have set up processes to help them. And when I was in McAllen last, I learned of a respite center run by Catholic Charities. There's a nun, Sister, I think her name is Sister Norma Pimentel. She sort of is the overseer of this organization, this respite center, and they go to the Greyhound station. They bring people to the respite center, which is not fancy. It's in an old nursing home. They're just like cobbling it together. People can sleep on some mats, they can take a shower, and they get a meal. And they get oftentimes they'll get a little care package that they can take with them on the bus to wherever they're going, North Carolina, where they have relatives. Or
Are they even given money to use for the bus, or is that something?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I'm sure that there are organizations. Yeah, I think Races Texas, which is another fabulous organization that you can support if you want to help people seeking asylum and immigrants and people facing deportation. Races, RAICES, Texas, has been amazing at providing legal services, providing bus tickets. They provide bus tickets. They go with people to the bus stations and help them navigate to figure out how to get on a bus, because most people, they don't speak English, or sometimes they don't speak Spanish either. They speak an indigenous language. Another great organization to support is the Texas Civil Rights Project. They are doing incredible work on the border, representing landowners whose property is being seized via eminent domain, representing people seeking asylum, defending the rights of people who are detained already in detention facilities. So when I went to the Catholic Charities Respite Center, I had a hard time finding it. There's not a big sign, it's not fancy. There's no sign. You have to know where it is. I went there and I just said, "Can I help?" They didn't know me from Adam, and they said, "Come on in." Thank you so much. Go down there and help sort clothes. And so I ended up working with a woman who is a winter Texan from Nebraska. And she volunteers there all the time. And we were sorting clothes for children. And then the families would bring the mother, usually just a mother or a father, would bring their children into the room to get clothes to wear north, because it was cold. And it was even colder in Chicago and North Carolina and the places. So we've got kids. One little girl was barefoot. I'd say she was about 4. I was trying to help her put on a shoe, find shoes to fit her, and she kept crying a little bit, and we finally figured out she had this huge sore on the bottom of her foot.
From walking.
And so there's a clinic at the respite center. She was taken, the woman from the Winter Texan took her to the clinic where she got some first aid. So it's also possible to provide financial support to this organization, Catholic Charities in the Rio Grande Valley. They are, I believe, doing good work based on, what I saw there. It was all volunteers, men and women, just helping their neighbor, feeding people, giving them clothes. They need winter clothes. There was a real shortage of winter clothes for children. We had to turn kids away. We don't have a coat for your daughter. We don't have any more. Everybody wanted a warm hat. We didn't have many hats. The kids were all ages. It was just pretty heartbreaking, actually. Yeah. There were several of the mothers and fathers just looked so tired. And even some of the children just looked so tired and beaten down and hungry and cold. And, it was heartbreaking, really. And they've been given a court date, so they'll have to return and plead their case in immigration court. Now, the problem with that is that there aren't enough attorneys to help them. They may or may not be able to speak for themselves. If they don't speak Spanish, there are more Spanish English language interpreters, but there are very few interpreters who can help the Maya people from Guatemala who speak various languages. So that's another way the administration is keeping people from becoming a natural or becoming, being granted asylum. So it's just these series of roadblocks, but there are ways that you and me can help. And I really recommend that people just go down to the border. It's beautiful. There's so many things of cultural interest. There's, natural beauty, and just see for yourself.
Well, if nothing else, it allows people to see for themselves why this whole idea of a border wall is absurd.
Crazy.
It's absolutely absurd because, for one thing, you are walking on a birding trail, and we're told by Customs and Border Patrol that you weren't allowed to walk there. So let's think about that for a minute. U.S. citizen walking in the United States is confronted by a Customs and Border Patrol officer and told you're not allowed to walk on this birding trail in what is actually a public land because there's a wall right there. So think about that for a minute. And that's another issue with this wall thing, because in some situations, because of the geography there, we would actually have to construct that wall about 2 miles into U.S. territory, which is basically conceding 2 miles of U.S. territory to Mexico. Because is Customs and Border Patrol going to go patrol on the other side of the wall and say, oh, no, the river is the barrier? Well, in that case, just let the river be the barrier.
It's a tricky thing. And then there's the wildlife issue, which as a scientist is near and dear to me. It doesn't take much to interfere with animals of any sort crossing where they would naturally cross for migration or just territory or mating or any of those sorts of things. And the butterfly center, you have talked to me about it, and also another friend of mine who's an entomologist went there, and the place is magical. The pictures of it looks like somebody has a domed place where butterflies are trapped. There's so many butterflies. It's just insane. And they want to put a wall through the middle of this. And you think, butterflies can fly over it. No, butterflies are not very good at barriers. They just aren't. Monarchs can get up really high, but a lot of the other ones can't. So you went to see this, right? At the center itself?
Yes. I've been to the National Butterfly Center twice. The first time I was interviewing Mariana Trevino-Wright, who is the executive director, and that was a really interesting experience that I'll tell you about, speaking of Border Patrol agents. And then the second time I went camping there, they had a camp out to just to kind of help people understand that it's not dangerous on the border.
Right.
The National Butterfly Center is right on the border. It's right on the Rio Grande River. The whole area is crawling with Border Patrol agents. There's a surveillance tower. There are drones. There are helicopters. There is a blimp. It's crazy. And but the National Butterfly Center is absolutely gorgeous. It is owned by the North American Butterfly Association, so it's private property. Border wall construction is likely to begin there in February. Wait, it is February. No, it's not. It's almost. Yes, it is February.
It is February.
Just barely.
Just barely. So the first time I went there to interview Mariana, to your point, first I drove up. There were 2 Border Patrol agents parked in trucks right near the entrance. They flashed their lights at me. I was like, okay, that's weird. And then I kept going. And then once Mariana and I started walking through the grounds, it's a beautiful center with all kinds. They've worked really hard to introduce native species or to reintroduce native species, take out invasive species. There are butterflies everywhere, flowers, there's rabbits, little bunnies everywhere. It's really beautiful. And we were approached first by one Border Patrol agent who Mariana introduced us, explained who we were. We were on their property. So there is what's called the Constitution-Free Zone. It's within 100 miles of any border of the United States. So even like the Great Lakes are considered the edge of the United States. All the coastal areas, 2/3 of the U.S. population lives within this Constitution-free, what some people call the Constitution-free zone. The reason they call it that is because our Fourth Amendment rights to protect us from unreasonable search and seizure are compromised by the powers given to the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. So they can set up checkpoints. They can enter private property without the private property owner's permission. They even will go so far as to get on the rooftop of your house to look for saying that they're looking for illegal immigrants. That happens to people in the Rio Grande Valley. They can request your electronic devices, your cell phone, your computer. So the National Butterfly Center, which is a place where they have campouts, Girl Scouts camp there every year, is basically now just crawling with Border Patrol agents. And I saw that when I was there. We were approached by at least 4 Border Patrol agents. One of them had a German Shepherd on a leash. As they approached, Mariana would caution me because I was interviewing her and I was taping the interview on my phone to put away my phone so that it wouldn't be seized by those Border Patrol agents. I made the mistake. I'm so naive. I made the mistake of asking one of the Border Patrol agents if I could take his picture. And he said no. And then after he left, Mariana said, well, you could have done it. There's no law against taking somebody's picture. So that was before the episode where I filmed the other Border Patrol agent because I had wised up a little bit. Yeah. But it is really frightening how civil liberties are they are compromised by our fear of, first it was fear of terrorism. Yeah. Now it seems to be just fear of anybody who's not white and American.
Right. And I mean, it seems to me in interacting with people on Facebook primarily, but I run into this sometimes other places too. It seems to me that the people who are most fearful of asylum seekers or Central American immigrants or whatever, they are not the people who live near the border.
Right.
It's somebody from Alabama or Indiana or wherever, and it's like, y'all don't even live in a border state.
Yeah, I actually was taking notes while I was listening to you speak, and that was one of the things I wrote was border state and sanctuary city. Because as somebody that lives in a border state and lives in a sanctuary city, both. I hear things said about border states and sanctuary cities, and it just makes my head spin. I'm just like, apparently I live in a gang-ridden, rape-infested, I can't even go outside without my sidearm because my life is threatened in this and all you have to do is look at the stats to see that sanctuary cities are very safe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so not only is the data available if you are ignorant about it, but you could ask somebody that lives there, are you afraid to walk outside your front door? And no, I'm not. And I live in a really diverse community. I don't live in a gated community. I don't live,
Right.
And there are all kinds of people where I live, and I walk and do my walks around the neighborhood, and I feel perfectly fine and perfectly safe. I'm a member of Next Door, which is like the neighborhood thing, and there are no stories about, caravans of brown people attacking anybody in the streets, and it's like I just don't understand where the stuff comes from. Well, I don't get it.
And I mean, it's like in my neighborhood, again, I don't live in a gated community or anything like that. It's a really diverse neighborhood, and the people that have been guilty of the most vandalism in my neighborhood are white kids often driving pickup trucks with a Confederate flag in the rearview mirror or the rearview window, you know? So these are not immigrants. They're not.
Yeah, and I mean,
They're not. There's not a speck of color in that pickup truck driving down there smashing mailboxes, you know?
It's just so bizarre to me to be sitting in the situation that's being discussed in a national dialogue and hearing so much misinformation. And you're just kind of looking at the television or looking at Facebook and going, what the hell are they talking about?
Right.
Like, what fantasy is this? And it's like you're saying, they can just simply say it and people absorb it without question. And then they repeat it, and it just spreads around, and it's like, this is completely not what's happening in my city. The city is, like you were describing, we try to do something positive, we try to do something good, and then the state legislature jumps all over it, right? So here in Austin, we tried to, we have, I think, currently still the ban on the plastic bags, and we push for reusable bags, and it's just an environmental thing. It's like, this is a nice environmental thing. We'll go for these bags. And the state legislature loses its crap and is just like, how can you do that? And it's like, okay, so first of all, even from a business perspective, right? So the grocery store now doesn't have to give us free bags. And if we forget our bags, we have to buy them. So
Win-win.
the store is not hurting, right? The store isn't hurting. They've moved from a model of giving away bags for free by the thousands to selling bags when someone forgets their bag, which I just can't imagine. It almost seems like it's just some grinchy anti-Loraxian, legislature that just simply says, no, you're doing something positive for the environment and it must not happen, because there's no real logic to it. And then they have the other thing where it was like, hey, let's do paid sick leave. Right? So we'll do a week of paid sick leave. If you have a company that's larger than, I think it was like 30 people or something like that, you're employing 30 people, you have to do a week of paid sick leave, if someone gets ill, which is, a generally good idea to not go to work if you're sick and make all the others employees sick, because while you may not be able to afford to have the time off, there might be 3 or 4 other people at work that could afford to have that time off, and it's like, so now they're homesick, and now your company has 4 people out because of the one person that you didn't pay for the 1 week. So it's just like, this is completely backward. It's the antithesis of helping anybody, and I don't see people freaking out in Austin over it, but somehow the state legislature is like, we can't wait to get back in session to undo all this evil that you're doing, like making sure sick people don't go to work and infect everyone else, and making sure the environment isn't getting polluted by all this like additional plastic that doesn't need to be generated. And now it's just like, hey, let's do something that's harmful directly to people. Let's let's just go after people just because they're not white.
Yeah.
We'll vilify them. We'll drum up fear around the country. And they'll find some story like I remember the one where it was a woman who had been killed by somebody who was here without documentation, and it was not here in Austin, but in a sanctuary city. They were here in the U.S., and she had been murdered by somebody that was undocumented. Of course, they never tell you that the majority of people who get murdered in this country, percentage-wise, are killed by other citizens, right? So it's not just that there's more citizens. It's like they're literally people who come here that aren't documented kill less people
per capita.
than we kill each other. And so if you really cared, if your problem was murder, you would be looking at why so many fewer illegal people that are here legally.
You'd be busting them in.
Yeah, well, or at least examining, okay, so why are they less likely to kill us? And maybe we should be looking at how we can implement some of that with our citizens, find out how we can do that. And so they're actually a model of a better model of violent crime than our own citizenry, and yet we treat them like they're the problem, right? And they'll say, well, they shouldn't be here. And it's like, so is your problem that their documentation isn't okay, or that somebody got murdered? Because if your problem is murder, then the documentation is actually correlating the other way, and you should be saying that person is safer to be here than my next door neighbor. And it's just amazing to me that they have this. It's so clear that they don't care about the murder; they care about the documentation, and the reason they care about the documentation is this person's not white. And they're afraid of that because they've been taught to be afraid of that.
Yeah, and that gets back to reason and another issue that we talk about a lot. They say that they don't want to abort babies, but they're also against any sort of birth control, which makes zero sense.
I forgot to add, like the whole reason I was bringing up the Sanctuary City killing was that the guy who had killed the woman had been expelled previously from multiple non-sanctuary cities. So they had deported him, he came back, they deported him, he came back, and finally he killed somebody in a sanctuary city. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, so how did the non-sanctuary model protect anybody?
Right.
Like what did that model do that every time he kept coming back and committing crimes, kept coming back committing crimes? What did your model that was not a sanctuary city do that was an improvement that stopped him from actually coming back in and killing somebody? Was it the sanctuary city that killed him, or was it the response from the non-sanctuary cities that just basically was a non-response?
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, deport him. It's like, yeah, and that you did, and he came back and he killed somebody. Thanks.
Yeah.
That helped.
It's all the sanctuary city's fault, and it isn't.
Right.
It goes back to the failures of previous, right?
Well, and of course, the latest thing in the news is that big seizure of fentanyl at the border.
Oh, yeah.
Coming through a border checkpoint.
Right. Port of entry. Yeah.
Yeah, false floor in the bottom of a truck carrying produce. Customs and Border Patrol agents detected it using their technology, and of course the fact that they know that people trying to smuggle stuff in the trucks. They're not floating them across the Rio Grande and dragging them through the butterfly center. And, you know,
Or carrying them in a backpack over a ladder of the border. Yeah.
yeah.
I actually heard a representative talking, like during the shutdown. The first question was, you know, this shutdown is doing harm to your constituents who are Native Americans because they weren't getting funding and support during the shutdown, right? So he was like, they're hurting during this period. What do your constituents say, the Native Americans who are suffering because of this, you know, the government shutdown and the government funding and all of this that stopped? And he said that they generally supported, like they understood about the wall and they understood the need for it, and that, you know, they were okay with this because they knew that this was really important and it was about national security and whatever. And so the person was like, well, and then so how is it about national security? Like, what is it that you think that you're being protected from? And he starts to describe drugs, and he's like, well, we have to stop drugs from coming through. And so the interviewer said, so when you talk to your constituents, do you tell them that a wall will stop drugs from coming through the border? And he goes, well, no, those are coming through like on checkpoints and stuff, and it's all about border security. It's not about a wall. It's about border security.
Yes.
And we need, you know, more funding to do better checks at these crossings. That's like part of it too, you know, and it's not about a wall, it's about border security. And so the interviewer said, so you would support a package that improves border security at things like checkpoints and stuff, even if it didn't have a wall? Well, no, because we got to have a wall. And I'm like, so it is about a wall.
Yeah.
I mean, this is basically what it is. It's about a wall. And when you start to talk about why you need the wall, you start giving reasons that don't even apply to the wall. When you're called out on that, you say it's not about the wall, it's about border security. And so when you're asked, would you approve better border security if it didn't include a wall? And you're just like, no. Well, that's a wall. That's all about a wall.
Well, you know, we always talk about, you know, is this the hill you're going to die on? And now we're down to, is this the wall you're going to die on? 'Cause
I like how they've been calling it wall. Like,
Yeah.
people aren't even calling it really the wall. Like, people, especially on Twitter, they're referring it to it as wall with
Yeah.
a capital W because
Yeah.
that's how Trump refers to it.
Yeah.
So it's become like its own personality or something. Wall.
Yeah.
Wall is going to do that. Wall is going to stop drugs. And
I love the Twitter meme that went around that had Hillary Clinton saying, you should build it out of my emails because nobody can get over those.
oh gosh, that's funny. There's all kinds of stuff. Like, you hear all these horrible analogies, right? So they'll say, well, this is. I saw some people talking about, well, maybe we should just have drones then in our prisons instead of walls. And I'm like, okay, so you think the border wall is what, to keep us in? Because that's what a prison wall is about.
Right.
It's about locking people
Yeah.
in that don't want to be there. Are you suggesting that that's what our border
people
wall
don't
is?
seem to get that walls work both ways.
Exactly.
I mean, there was a wall between East and West Germany
Yes.
Oh gosh.
for a long time.
Yes.
The speech, what was it? The speech about the wall. Oh my gosh, that little speech where it was like, at first it was this we're all in agreement on national security. This was the talk, I guess, that Trump gave when he was talking about the negotiations and how they were going, and we're going to end this shutdown right now for 3 weeks. And so he gave this little, 10-minute speech or whatever. And he starts out and he's like, this is all, we're all in agreement. We all want to see border security, and we're going to work on that. We're going to look at expert opinion on what needs to be done.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was probably 2 minutes in, and he's just like starts going on about the wall, and he's going on about wall, and he says, wall is going to be great. It's going to work really well, just like it does in Israel. And I thought, okay, well, there's bomb number one. Let's drop that bomb, right? Because that's not a good example, right? That'd probably be a bad example, because the first thing I'm thinking of is Jared Kushner in Israel, like, at the fancy feast while the Palestinians are being bombed and shot outside the Israeli wall, right? I mean, we all saw those images, and I'm like, don't use that as your example. And it reminded me of this, like, you might as well just say Berlin, right? It's going to work just like it did in Berlin. Yeah. I mean, some walls you probably just don't want to
reverence
use. Yeah, and there was something else he said. I just remember laughing, and I was just like, wow, no, you don't want to use that either, right? Like, and it just went downhill from there, and I was just like, wow, this is, it started out on the first 2 minutes were nice, sort of, we have border security issues and we all agree and we can all work on this, and and it's like, oh, it's great, let's stop the drugs, let's stop the and then it all went to Wild World, and I'm like, okay,
ridiculousness completely.
It's just, but it's just amazing, the ability to just say a thing. Like, you just say it, and suddenly it becomes reality for so many people. Just because it's said.
Again. You just say it over and over again, and if you say it enough times with enough vehemence and enough certainty and from enough different platforms and supported by enough bots to get your message out. And then that becomes this false narrative that everybody buys into.
There's so much information, though, that is available that people either they don't have, or and I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of this, right? Because I think it's one of those things that you don't know you're doing it when you do it, right? So I'm probably guilty of it myself. But there are just so many times when I'm seeing people talking about things, and they really don't have the information. They have a strong opinion, but no real information. I've had people throw information at me that immediately when I hear it, I just think, that sounds far-fetched, right? Like, my first reaction is, that doesn't even sound feasible. And you Google it, and it's like, not even close to fact. And so I've gone back to people and said, this is, or watched other people go back to them and say, here's the fact. And it's like flip-flopped of what you just said. So, and my thing is, where did you get the information? Like, do you even know where you heard this? And in one instance, somebody did. It was like a representative that was from their state that was promoting it. And they said, this is where I heard it. And I was just like, okay. I didn't know who the person was, like, when they gave the name. But I found out later it was a representative. But I said, well, whoever that is, next time they tell you something, be sure to look it up, because I wouldn't trust this data that comes from them. This is not a good source of information. And that, I feel bad, because these are people in positions of power. And at some point, I understand a person saying, well, I have to put some trust in my elected leadership, because they're getting briefings, and they have access to information. So the model is supposed to be that they know more about it than we do. And it's really sad, because I think they do know more about it, but they're not saying it, right? Or they say it in a way that is misleading, and they know it's misleading, right? 4,000 terrorist suspects across the board. And it's like,
nonsense.
you're confusing people who are taking that number, and they're applying it to this southern border issue. And that number doesn't belong there, but you're mixing it up in a way that is making people think that that's what's happening.
Or the 95,000 people who were registered to vote illegally, and 58,000 of them voted illegally in the last election.
There's something I loved about that, right? Which is that we have this overwhelming Republican legislature that was on
elected by those people.
That was on the crap end of that stick, right? So it comes out, and it's like, 95,000 illegal votes in and it was like, obviously, and that's another thing. It's like, that's one of those numbers that when you hear it, if you don't stop and say, okay, that sounds completely ridiculous. That cannot be true. If that doesn't happen in your brain, then you shouldn't have opinions on anything. If you can't recognize that kind of a red flag of this isn't even possible. And so, of course, I think now they're dropping people off the list like by the hundreds per day, right? Like they're saying, and people are getting back in touch with them and saying, "What the hell? Of course, I'm a citizen. Like I voted before," and so they're trying to correct it. But what's really funny is that we have Republican representatives who are kind of being confronted by this fake news promotion.
Oops.
Right, at the hands of their Republican president. And now they are being basically told, you're the problem that's causing the illegal voting, and you're the ones that are, and it's like, they're being attacked, they're eating their own. And I'm just like, whatever. You put him in, and now you're the one getting the fake news tweets that, he's attacking you in your state and saying you don't have your shit together, basically. Good. Good. It's crap, but it's crap you get to deal with, Cruz.
And so for people that might not be aware of how this came about, it's an example of the kind of incompetence we often deal with at the state level here. Secretary of State produced this list, and it was based on an extract of information from the DMV when people get their driver's licenses. Well, in Texas, we only renew our licenses every 6 years. And so a lot can happen in 6 years. But when you go to get your driver's license in Texas, you have to produce some kind of identification. And since, I think, 2016, you've had to produce the information that would basically validate your U.S. citizenship. Before then, you didn't have to because we didn't have this real ID thing that they require now. So anyway, people would come in, and some people had ID that indicated they were not U.S. citizens. Well, they've become U.S. citizens since then. And so if you look at the DMV records, it's going to show that they produced an ID that said maybe it was a green card or a passport or something like that said they were not citizens. So that's where this 95,000 name list came from. And oh my God, 58,000 of them voted in the last election. And it turns out that I think they've yet to find a single person who voted, a single instance of a non-citizen voting from that list.
There are literally people that are involved in this mess right now that are saying, you know what, we need to just stop.
Yeah.
We need to go back and pull a good list.
Yeah.
Like this list was a bad idea. It's and it's just been it's a train wreck. It's a big, hot mess.
But Trump tweeted it. Trump
Yes,
tweeted all those numbers, and all those people who just follow whatever he says are just going to buy it. And I think, in a way, it goes back to our education system and teaching people to think critically and evaluate sources and question authority and think about what they're being told. And I don't think that our education system is succeeding in a lot of ways at teaching people that.
And that's an excellent point. And the other thing is, this is a classic propaganda tactic, because Texas demographics are not in favor of the Republicans.
Right.
Texas is trending blue.
Right.
And I mean, we saw this in the last election when Ted Cruz was crapping himself on election night because Beto was so close. He was not supposed to be that close.
Yeah, that was almost miraculous.
Yeah.
And coming from an atheist,
so,
that's saying something.
So now by publicizing this $95,000 or 95,000 illegal voters in Texas, now they're poisoning the well. So when Texas goes blue, they can say, oh, it's because of all those illegals that are voting. Even though it is not a problem. No one who is a non-U.S. citizen voted in the last election. There's no evidence that that's happening in Texas or really anywhere else. Because if you're not here legally, if you don't have legal immigration status here,
vote.
You can't vote. And why would you even sign up to vote knowing that you would put yourself at risk of deportation.
Yes.
And if you got deported for
Right.
that, you would never get back in.
Yes.
Not only deportation, but they were talking about
Imprisonment.
that.
Yeah, they put you in prison.
On
Yeah.
NPR, they were discussing that there's like super harsh penalties for that type of voting, and
Yeah.
they were like, if you get caught, the penalties are really bad. They're really stiff, and in order, to take that risk would just be ridiculous.
Which shows you how wound up their fear level is.
Well, I thought of a really good analogy. I guess it was maybe like a week and a half ago, and I just thought this is because I was trying to think of how to describe it, right? And it really didn't have to do with the political structure, but I guess you could apply it to that, right? So I was thinking more in terms of indoctrination versus critical thought. Like when you put a lot of energy, for example, when I was a Christian, right, I put a lot of energy into learning about the doctrine, going to classes and studying and researching and asking questions. And so later, when people would say like you're not being critical, you're not asking questions, you don't really know about it, I would be like, no, I've really studied this and I've really looked at this. But it was all geared toward learning it, not questioning it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, how do you explain that? And then I started to think about it, and I thought, it's almost like when you become a sales associate at a company, right?
Yeah.
You just want to go and you need to learn the product. You need to learn all the selling points of the product. You also want to have the information about like how it's not as good as maybe your competitor's product, but you're not going to give that to somebody. You're not going to walk up and say, well, our competitor actually offers this really cool feature that we don't. You don't tell people that, right? So you're more focused on, let me know what sells the product, what will sell this product. And so you go in and you learn that because your whole goal is to promote this, not to challenge it. So yeah, you're putting in time, energy, you're reading, but you're looking at all the sources that are about how great your product is, and you don't want to hear how it's not great.
Support your point of view.
Now, on the other side of that is the customer. And the customer is far more likely to be looking at your product, to be looking at your competitor's product, to be asking you, well, they offer this feature, but I don't see that. Does your product do this, right? The customer is the one that's critically looking at the product, right? That's looking at those selling features and saying, but I also need to know if you can do this for me, or what happens when it does that, and does it have a conflict with this, and can it merge with this other program? Can it, and so I think we need to look at ideologies like customers, not like salespeople. Because there's too many people that are ready to be the salesperson because they already are on board. It's almost like they've been hired by the company, and now they just want the selling points so they can go out and sell it. And it's like, no, you need to be the customer. When they come to you and they're giving you the information about the product, you don't have to be somebody's sales associate. You can actually be the customer. I just think that we need more customers.
Well, and the main selling point is fear. The main thing they're using to sell all these ideas is fear.
Right, but then they have the propaganda points.
Yeah.
But they're not even true, right? It's like me saying, yeah, my copier can put out 200,000 sheets a month, and that's no problem. And I'm totally lying to you. The thing is stretched at 50,000.
Or saying that copier will give you cancer. You should buy my copier.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the woman that we talked to at the march, and her synopsis of it being that they're looking for their savior. They don't want to question. They want somebody to help them. And it doesn't matter what they say. Just like in indoctrination, they'll believe it, and they'll...
But it's like
stop
Jen
it.
is saying, we're talking about, someone in Nebraska who thinks they need to be saved by MS-13, from MS-13, right?
right.
And we're sitting there going, we live in a sanctuary city in a border state, and MS-13 is like, we don't even think about
it doesn't exist here.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come up in conversation. Nobody worries about it. I wouldn't recognize a gang flashing sign if I saw
The degree to which it is not here is I am a street art connoisseur, so to speak, and I photograph it and document it, and I love it, and I hate tagging. I have never, ever in Austin seen an MS-13 tag. Never. And I look for it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't know one if I
Tagging
did,
stuff.
which is like a testament to how it's not a concern for
Well,
me.
the thing is, I mean, MS-13's not coming across the southern border because MS-13 was born here.
Yeah, aren't they in prisons and stuff?
Yeah, it's a prison gang.
I'm like, I don't even
and in
know.
fact, we exported it to Central America, not the other way around.
The whole thing is just whack, And like I said, you just sit here in the sanctuary city, in the border state going, the hell are they talking about?
Yeah.
Right?
This is gaslighting at its finest. It's gaslighting.
And the border cities are even safer. The border cities,
Right.
the ones right on the border, are some of the safest in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember telling somebody about about the statistics around violent crime and immigrants, including immigrants without documentation. And they were just like, well, where are you getting that information? And it was just like, well, here's like this, but let me back up the truck of studies that I can dump on you here. And so I just dumped them. I wasn't being like a brat about it. I was just saying, well, there's this one, there's this one, there's like, they looked at the data like this, they looked at the data. And I was like, no matter how you slice and dice this data, the closest thing I've seen to a challenge to it was like a specific location where they found like a flipped
Cherry picking.
a flipped correlation. But it's just like it's not even challengeable. And most of the legitimate criticism around it is that it's very hard to get the data at all. So it's very hard to get good data on people that are not wanting to be identified. And I understand that, but you still have to look at it like, okay, but we're still left with the data we're left with, right? So if you're going to look at the data, you can say like, well, we need better data. And I would agree. I'd be happy if we had like really good data on it. That I'm not worried about getting better data. And if I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong.
But
right?
you can't say
right. But you still got to use data. And when people are saying like, oh, they're dangerous and they're violent and it's like, yeah, but that's not what the statistics show. Is there going to be somebody in that population that's dangerous and violent? Sure. But does that mean that violence and murder and stuff in this country is being perpetuated on some escalated level by immigrants or people without documentation?
Quite the opposite.
Yeah. And that's what I've said before. If you could wave a magic wand and delete the immigrant population from the U.S., you would literally be concentrating the violent criminals.
Yes.
You would be raising your own risk and your neighbor's risk of being violently assaulted or murdered in the country by eliminating the lesser violent populations.
Awesome. Just wonderful discussion. We have just a little bit of time left, and you had some things that you wanted to say before we go. Is that right? Did you have anything else you wanted to?
I just have one more thing.
Okay,
please.
so let's...
And I want to go back to something that Jen
cool.
said about walls keeping people in as well as keeping them out. So probably y'all are aware, I'm not sure everyone's aware, that in the Rio Grande Valley, people are being denied passports. And they're being denied passports on the basis of being delivered by a midwife.
Yeah, providers.
By certain
Right.
providers.
Right.
By certain providers. And that's scary to me.
Yes.
I mean, my understanding of how this is determined is they're basically saying that there have been some providers that were identified who have been convicted of literally single-digit falsification of birth certificates.
Yeah.
These people have delivered hundreds and hundreds of children, and yet they've been convicted of a couple of falsifications.
Or even just accused. I mean, there's some
some cases
sometimes not even just convicted.
But
just
what's happening,
accused.
though, is that they're literally now putting freezes on all of the people that were ever delivered by them.
By that person.
And it's just like, whoa, okay.
And coincidentally, one of the doctors whose the babies that he delivered and that his clinic delivered, they're putting freezes on those babies being allowed to get passports is the father of Mariano Trevino Wright, who runs the National Butterfly Center, who's a very outspoken critic of the Trump administration and of the wall. And they are targeting, he was a doctor, delivered thousands of babies in the Rio Grande Valley. And on the basis of one person's affidavit that they won't even produce, they're saying that those birth certificates are invalid, that they're refusing to provide people passports. The other thing that's happening is that immigration activists who are crossing into Mexico to help asylum seekers in Tijuana, this just was reported in the LA Times, I think yesterday. Their passports are being flagged by Mexican immigration officials, and they're being prevented from entering Mexico or kicked out of Mexico. So in other words, and they're being told that their passports are flagged by an unknown country. So imagine if you try to travel and you're an activist or an attorney or anybody, and you're told sorry, you can't leave or you can't come into our country. Your passport's been flagged by an unknown country. That scares the crap out of me.
Isn't this the nightmare that all the preppers and the NRA advocates were saying? Like they were so prepared to respond to with this revolution. Like, where's the revolution?
Right. Yeah. Well, or just where is the outrage about this attack on people's civil liberties?
Yeah. Right.
And
the things that you're describing are the same stuff that when Alex Jones was back in Austin, this is the stuff he would have crapped his pants over.
Yeah.
And now he's supporting it.
Yeah, it's really interesting how things change with the direction the wind is blowing.
I did want to say, though, about the birth, like just before we get too far off the birth certificates, the one thing that was interesting is there were a lot, like when this broke, there were a lot of stories about how they were addressing it with people, right? So people were being surprised, like, oh, I can't get a passport.
Right.
And so when they would look into it, they were told basically we have to validate your birth, right? That you were born here. Mm-hmm. Now, I was just like, if you reject my birth certificate,
right?
How?
Right, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And one of the questions, and people can Google this because I would be saying that this is one of those red flags where I would say that sounds like bullshit to me, but please go and Google it because I don't blame you for thinking it's bullshit and I encourage you to look it up. One of the questions that we're asking people is, do you remember when you were born?
Yeah.
Right? I mean...
yeah, I do. I remember it clearly.
Yeah, see, my wife jokes with me about that all the time. She's like, well, you remember your birth. And I'm like, but no one remembers their birth, right?
I'm glad I don't remember my birth.
Yeah, me too, actually.
It's probably not a time I want to recall.
No, I think that's blacked out for a good reason.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I didn't get to this last time, and I wanted to get to this time. I wanted to talk about Shirley Chisholm. She is an amazing woman, and if you don't know about her, this is part of what I want to do on a regular basis, where I talk about people that you probably didn't learn about in school that you should have. And she's one of those amazing folks. Shirley Chisholm, she was born in 1969 and died in 1983.
Not 69.
Oh, wait. That's when she was, I'm so sorry.
Young.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Where is her birth? Is it not on here? Remember? Oh, damn it. Okay. Never mind. A bad brain day.
We don't know when
really,
she was born.
really
she
bad.
She doesn't remember either.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Does she remember when she was born?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I have it here. 1924
Okay.
to 2005. It's at the next page. So sorry. Oh, Lordy. Okay. In 1968, she became the first black woman elected to the United States Congress, and she represented New York's 12th congressional district for 7 terms from 1969 to 1983. In 1972, she became the first black candidate for a major party's nomination for President of the United States and the first woman to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. Hoo boy. And in 2015, Chisholm was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. As an atheist, I'm thinking, God damn it. She never got to know about it. Okay, so her early life, she was born to immigrant parents from the Caribbean region, and she taught at a nursery school while furthering her education, earning her master's degree in elementary education in 1952. Don't let anybody tell you that an education degree doesn't mean anything. This woman rocked what she knew about early education and early development of children. It was during her career as an educator that she became known as an authority on issues involving early education and child welfare. She did some amazing things. One of her early activities in the New York State Assembly was to argue against the state's literacy test requiring English. We have talked about this before, how you can't legally bar someone based on their skin color, but you can do things that based on their demographics, they're more more likely to not qualify. And that's one of the things that she fought against. So she played a critical role in the creation of the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, the WIC program. And all those that she hired in her office were women, and half of them were black. Chisholm said that she had faced much more discrimination during her New York legislative career because she was a woman than because of her race. Wow. She also worked on a bill to give domestic workers the right to a minimum wage. And here's the thing that's really fantastic and says a lot about who she was. She accomplished both those things by working with white Republican men. Mm-hmm. She could work the system. She was amazing. Let's see. She was a vocal opponent of the draft and supported spending increases for education, of course, health care, and other social services. She was the first black majority party candidate to run for president. I already said that one. Not losing my mind entirely. Here's something that's really sad and interesting. Her campaign was underfunded, only spending $300,000 in total. My God.
Yeah.
This is crazy. She also struggled to be regarded as a serious candidate instead of as a symbolic political figure. She was ignored by much of the Democratic political establishment and received little support from her black male colleagues. She later said, when I ran for Congress, when I ran for president, I met more discrimination as a woman than for being black. Men are men. She said that, not me. In particular, she expressed frustration about the, quote, black matriarchy thing, unquote, saying, they think I am trying to take power from them. The black man must step forward, but that doesn't mean the black woman must step back. So she dealt with a lot of crap and was successful despite that. After leaving Congress, Chisholm resumed her career in education, and she was named to the Purington Chair at the all-women Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, and this is a position previously held by W.H. Auden, Burton Russell, who is one of our heroes, and Arna Bontemps. Let's see. Oh, yes. And this is really awesome. She's got a stamp. I collect stamps, so I have her stamp. But Shirley Chisholm will receive a monument in Prospect Park scheduled for 2020.
Cool.
Right on. And Chisholm is the first woman to be so honored by She Built New York City. How about that?
Cool.
So there's someone you need to pay attention to.
Can I just say, let's think about for a minute how awesome it would have been if we had had a black woman teacher as president back in the 70s.
Holy cats.
I mean, can you imagine
I can't.
what we would have accomplished?
I really can't either.
I mean, and there are recordings of some of her campaign speeches out there now.
Oh, yeah.
And if you get a chance, you should look these up, because if she were running for president right now, she would be a serious contender for the Democratic nomination. Some of the stuff she talked about back then, people are just getting back around to now. So.
Yeah. It says here, I have a ton more stuff. I just had to crop it down to the very highest of highlights. Chisholm's speech for the Equal Rights Amendment, given in 1970, is listed as one of the top 100 speeches of the 20th century. So, yes, she was an amazing speaker.
Yes.
Quite a force. And on the picture that was up there, her motto was amazing. And I'm trying to remember what it was, because that brain cell did die, apparently. Not bought and
unbought and unbossed.
there you go.
Nice.
She was badass.
Yes.
And yet very politic, clearly, because
Yes.
she could work with folks across the aisle and get stuff done for the people who needed it.
Yep.
Children and underprivileged folks. Just amazing woman. Read more about her if you can find it. I'm sure you can. I mean, just look on Google if you have time to find it, is what I really meant to say. Okay. So, like I said, hit that subscribe button. Jen, you want to say something?
Well, yeah, Tracie had brought up abortion earlier. We
Oh.
had started talking about that.
Yeah.
I guess New York and Virginia have abortion. Well, Virginia's been tabled, but New York's abortion law.
Late term.
Yeah, late term
abortion stuff.
Well, basically what it does is it takes all the restrictions off and says,
Do what you need to do with your
do
doctor.
what you need to do.
And that's nuts. That just won't fly.
Yeah, and so there are people saying, oh, but the woman can be, I actually saw somebody make this comment, that the woman can be in labor and the doctor can perform an abortion. And so I want to make a point.
Out of
The purpose of an abortion is to end a pregnancy.
Right.
If the woman is in labor, the pregnancy is ending. And if she's so far along that she's basically in labor, guess how you end a pregnancy at that point?
Right. It's ending. Basically.
You induce labor at that point. There is no abortion procedure for that.
Yeah, I got in an argument on Facebook with somebody over this, and he asked if I would say it's okay to abort a fetus at 9 months, and I said, yeah.
Yeah, you can end a pregnancy at 9 months.
And
They
he
end
said-
at 9 months.
He thought I was a monster for that, and here how he set it up was even more glorious. She wants to get the abortion because she has a party that weekend and doesn't want to miss it.
Yeah.
And I mean that's just
Because everybody does that, right?
yeah, right. Yeah, abortion is just like getting a mole off, you know? And
Yeah.
so I said, yeah, if she wants to get that abortion because she's going to have a party, yes, she should have that right. But no woman's going to do that. And
Right.
thank
Right.
you, by the way, for feeling that women have that little
Yeah.
good judgment and that little regard for pregnancy and giving birth and all those things. Just completely outrageous. So, yeah, these things.
Well, and this person obviously has never seen a woman who has just gone through labor because, okay, if you're, 9 months pregnant and you want to end the pregnancy, first of all, you're going to be induced. It's not a quick, easy. You go through labor and you push that baby out, or you get a
Pitocin is
C-section.
not your friend. It
No.
hurts. Yeah.
And then, if you've got, a party coming up, oh, my party's in a couple of hours or a couple of days, or you're not going to be up for that, okay? You're going to be bleeding,
Yeah.
you're going to be sore, you're going to be really tired. You're not going to be in a mood for a party,
Yeah.
okay?
In fact, I said to him, if she can find a doctor who will do it, then yes, that's what I said.
Well, and that was the thing with regard to Canada, right? So I was reading this really confused article on late-term abortions in Canada, and it starts out with somebody that's kind of peeved because they say, it literally starts, I am totally fed up with lawyered assertions that totally misrepresent the facts. While in Canada we do not have a law, we do have very strict professional guidelines. So here's the thing. I have never said that Canada does abortions like
willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have pointed out that they don't have laws that govern it. And it is such a commonly expressed pro-choice point to say this is a decision that should be left to the woman and her doctor.
It should not be legislated at all.
And so this person is basically saying they are, while this page in total is not pro-choice, they're basically trying to say we do have restrictions that are part of the medical ethics community.
Right, yeah.
And I'm looking at it and saying, which is exactly what the pro-choice proponents say,
Right, yeah.
that this is a decision left to the woman and the
her
doctor.
doctor, yes.
Right? And that there is, and what you're basically saying when you say, hey, we have, a requirement here that, let's see, they described it at one point, like the reasons for it. And it was just something like, there has to be like a pressing medical need after 24 weeks. And I'm like, yeah. And I don't know anybody that's going to go 6 months of a pregnancy and then just say, I'm bored being pregnant.
Yeah.
Right?
This is what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Like you're going to go through most of it and then suddenly just, willy-nilly change your mind, right? Like women who are having abortions at that period are basically being confronted with really sad situations where they're probably heartbroken that they are going through this procedure at this point. These are women who probably have their nursery half set up in the home, right? And so we're literally converting them into these like horrible, harpies that just want to kill their babies.
To go to a party.
Yeah. And that person, I mean, if they do exist, it's like such a minute speck. And like you said, like what doctor? You'd have to have that person find that doctor who would be willing to risk their license for a thing like this. And But the whole thing is, while they're going on about, this, then they start going into like why they need laws. And it's like, you just explained.
That we don't.
In Canada, though, this is Canada. It's like you just explained that sans laws, you have a good regulatory system for taking care of these women, taking care of these babies, that you're not allowing for like these just, wildly chosen late-term abortions for bizarre reasons or whatever. And that the doctors are trying to be discreet with it. And this is all going on without laws between the women and their doctors.
With ethics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that scares me about the United States is not that I think that our women are going to be wildly wanting late-term abortions for giggles. It's that if we did say we weren't going to legislate this, we would have Liberty University turning out OBGYNs with degrees that were then flooding the medical market and setting the ethics through some board like AMA saying basically, we're going to promote our religious view of abortion through the AMA now instead of through legislators. So there's no way to police against this kind of intrusion, I don't think, in the United States, because we are too whack-ass when it comes to religious right and how they will get involved. Wherever that decision is made, they will find a way to insert themselves.
They're very strategic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and there are already legislators who are promoting legislation that would protect healthcare providers who want to refuse service for their own personal conscience reasons, which basically it's right now targeted toward trans people.
Yes.
But there's no restriction.
Where do you draw the
Yeah,
line?
like the
It is
Catholic hospitals, they're stopping now the, any sort of sterilization.
Right.
So getting a vasectomy, they're like starting to say we don't want to have to do that. And they've already gotten into the pharmacists, where it's just like they don't have to prescribe. And,
Yeah, and the Catholic thing is
or not
like,
prescribe, I'm sorry, fulfill the prescriptions.
it's even more, it's like hysterectomies. Basically, the doctor has to determine that your uterus is not a hospitable environment for a fetus before the Catholic hospital will agree to do a hysterectomy. Even if you've got a medical condition and you need it or you just want it, they won't do it, until you can prove that no baby can survive in my uterus. So.
Yeah. And
It's a barren wasteland.
I don't want to break.
So yeah, I mean, it's just to me this article was just so interesting because it starts out basically, screaming how misleading it is to say that they don't have, reasonable oversight for late-term abortion in Canada because doctors and women have come together and this is like what they've decided, and so there is this ethical framework around it that everybody is working within, and we do have these reasonable restrictions and we need laws. And it's like, no, you just said you got it worked out without the laws. And you're letting these women do it with these doctors, and you said that the doctors have come up with, that they are using ethics in order to determine this. And there is no reason when somebody comes to us with this, hey, and she wants to go to the party, and she, should she be able to? But it's like, yeah. And when you show me the flood of where that's happening.
Yeah, that's like, not to be too lookist or whatever, but Joan Rivers, all the plastic surgery she had, and she had to really work to find somebody who would do the last surgery, and it killed her.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can find a doctor to do that sort of thing, and it is definitely the outlier. It is not going to be the norm.
And if you're the person that can afford that doctor, you can go to Paraguay to have it done or wherever you need to go. I don't know what abortion laws are in Paraguay, so I just picked a South American country.
But no, that's the thing. It's like if you have the money, you can find someone who'll do
the people that can afford it are going to get whatever they want somewhere. There's always going to be somewhere, even if it's somewhere that doesn't have the ethics, where you can go and get it. But it's just like, if a doctor wants to risk their license for it.
And that's not even legislated, the plastic surgery.
Yeah.
So, but abortion is the only medical procedure.
Well, and the thing is,
legislated.
these decisions are being made by people who are not required to have any sort of medical medical degrees, medical understanding. They don't even, and the things that come out of their mouths show that they don't understand facts.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that kind of leads to the whole concept of abortion regret that people like to put out there. That
we
women
did a whole show on that, gang.
Yeah,
Go back and find it.
That could, okay, so I don't know if I brought this up during that show, but knee replacement surgery. So TKR, okay? People don't sign up to get a total knee replacement unless they got some issues, you know? It's usually pain, mobility challenges, there's a lot of issues. So the incidence of people regretting their total knee replacement surgeries, which they signed up for good reasons, is higher than the number of women who regret their abortions. But we're not talking about, you know, informed consent, and, you know, oh, you got to get an ultrasound, you got to get all these, you know, you got to watch a normal knee in action or whatever. You know, we're not requiring all this bullshit.
I'll tell you, if regret was the reason to outlaw stuff, we wouldn't allow marriage.
Right. There's pretty significant regret over that.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. And there was I pulled up the statistics for the regret that people have for having had children, and I don't think it's horribly high, but I know that the statistics were that it was higher than those who regret having had an abortion. So, yeah.
Yeah, because more people actually think about the abortion before they do it than think about the pregnancy before they find out they're pregnant, right? Most people find out they're pregnant after the fact, which is the other thing when people are just like, well, you know, you consented to this. It's like, no, you didn't even know it, right? You found out, and that's when you had to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, the people that go forward to it, half the time, I don't even think they question it. I don't even think that, because you don't have to think it through. You just have to do nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And for those of you out there thinking we're beating this dead horse to death, we get letters from people that say, thank you, because you changed my mind on this.
Yeah.
So it happens. Just chill out while we get to the next thing. Whatever. Yeah, it's an important issue, and it's one that affects women and everybody, really.
Yeah, I've had people get on me because they took issue with me calling it a violation of a woman's body.
Oh, I know. That was big.
Yeah, they literally thought that was like, you know, whoa, that was extreme.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, really? Really? So, like, I mean, these are people that would in no wise argue that a rape is not a violation. You know, they would say that a rape is a violation of your body, and yet 9 months of somebody's body being inside you and using every single system of your body without your consent, they would say is
permanently
like,
changing.
God, you can't call that a violation.
Permanently changing your body
Yeah.
while it's doing this.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah.
I just don't even understand. Right? You know, I was chatting with a friend of mine who was talking about her experience because she has 2 children and she's had like really, really rough childbirths. But she wanted the children and she has the kids and she's very happy. And she also has a rape in her past. And I was just talking to her and I said, you know, I don't ever, like, not having had kids and not having been raped, I'm the last person who's going to try to draw that comparison. But I'm like, just from a purely metrics standpoint of how deep within the body, how long it goes on, how dangerous it is, I'm like, it just seems like the non-consensual pregnancy, gestation, and birth would be more of a violation than
I would
than
feel
the rape.
that way. If somebody said, you're pregnant and you have to stay that way, and I didn't want to, that's incredible
She
invasion.
responded to me and said, after 2 consented pregnancies and a rape in my history, I would say that I would think that the non-consensual pregnancy would be worse for me. She's like, I wouldn't want that. And she said that she described someone else she had heard who had been forced through a pregnancy, and the way they described when they felt the fetus move for the first time and how violated and horrible they felt, and the things they did in their own home, like trying to force the end to the pregnancy in ways that, you know, were dangerous. And I don't understand when somebody basically wants to say that that's not a physical violation. I mean, that's just an individual with zero compassion, zero empathy for what it is. You know, I think sometimes people just have this idea that because if somebody is born with a uterus, then that's why is that a problem? If they and it's like, because it's still your body. Like, this is still your body, and nobody else has a right to insert themselves in it or to be, you know. And then they get into the whole, you know, sex thing, and it's like, all parents have had sex, but we don't force them to give, you know, blood tissue donations if their child has a challenge to its you know,
well-being.
if
Right.
it has a viability issue later in life, we don't force anybody to do that, you know. I mean, and I saw like a post for my representative, right, and they were saying something about their pro-life bill and how they were so proud of it. And I said, oh, does it include a clause that forces fathers to donate blood and tissue if there's viability issues with their offspring, just like you're doing for the, for the biological mothers? Because
Just because we're built for it doesn't mean that it gets to force us into doing it.
you don't get to
Right.
dismiss that. I mean, to me, that's right up there with the times when before we realized that you could be married and raped. The women who were being raped and who were married knew that they were married and being raped, but the rest of society was just like, well, you can't be raped by your own husband.
Yeah.
You agreed to sex when you got married, right? That was you consented to this, right? So that can't be a rape. It's like, yeah, but you're not the person being raped by the guy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter if he's got like some piece of paper.
You can tie this to the immigration issue.
Let's do it.
Let's do that. Oh, we're going over time on good stuff. Go.
It's all right.
Okay. Real quick. So there was a teenager in immigrant detention here in Texas who was pregnant. And she wanted to end the pregnancy.
Yeah.
And she was being forced to carry the child. And eventually, I am not sure whether it was the ACLU or but they got involved, and she was eventually able to get an abortion. But those months, however long that was, and she was forced to carry that child while in detention, just not only like taken her freedom taken away from her physically, like in order to move through space, but also her freedom over her own body.
Right, because they
Taken away
pushed
from
her.
her.
They pushed her into a second trimester abortion.
Yeah, they
because
delayed
of the
it.
delays,
Yes.
and they were
So
pushing
that it
her
made it much
right
worse.
up to the limit.
Yeah,
when she could get-
they were basically trying to force her to hit the time period where it wouldn't be legal.
Now, who
Yeah.
was that? Was that Ken Paxton who was doing that? Was that
Well,
her?
I'm having trouble. I was like, I couldn't remember if it was a legislator
Actually,
or a judge.
Brett Kavanaugh was sitting on that case. He was
okay.
the one ruling on that case in the D.C. Circuit.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Wow, it just all ties together.
Yeah.
Somehow that all, Council Pre.
Yeah, consistent respect for women.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Wow. Good show, ladies. Really good stuff. Thank you so much. So, Jen, thank you so much as always. And
Thank you.
Tracie, awesome. Annie, thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
and
thanks
sharing
to
stuff
everybody.
we can do. It's so
Absolutely.
important. And I got applause on the other side of the wall. And thank you to the guys on the other side of the wall
Yes,
over
those
there.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Thanks for supporting.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for watching us. And please, there they are. They're the guys.
Hey.
Yeah.
I love them all. And click that subscribe button, please. So, we don't need a savior. We've got each other. It's all we've ever had and all we'll ever need. Bye.